Hello, Daniel Nation. This is Brandon Burden coming to you with our monthly podcast, The Daniel Report. And this month we are focusing on the chair race and the vice chair race for the Republican Party of Texas. Our state convention is coming up this week, and we're interviewing all the candidates running for the chair and vice chair positions. And so this is part 6 of that series. And my guest today is Amy Teal. Hi, Amy. Welcome to our show.
Hi.
Nice to have you with us. So we're going to do actually a two-part here. In the first part, we're going to interview Amy, who's running for both chair and vice chair. And then in the second part, we're going to interview her husband, Gary, who's running for the chair position. Did I get that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Well, Amy, tell us, first of all, a little bit about who you are and why are you running for the chair and vice chair position?
Well, first of all, I am a mom. I'm here in Texas. Been here a long time doing a lot of political activism around the state within the local Republican Party and the state and the RNC meetings. I met Gary at a Republican National Committee meeting. And my biggest issues have been to lower taxes and focus on transparency and educating people about the process. Last time around, I ran for all 3 positions. That was a presidential year. And we had the state chair, the vice chair, and the national committee woman spot. And something that a lot of people don't realize as a delegate is that there's a filing deadline. And the only candidates that delegates will be allowed to choose from are people who filed before convention was ever called to order. And sometimes that makes sense to them in the state chair and the vice chair race because those happen pretty quickly. But by the time we got to Saturday and we were in our CD caucuses and the chair announced that, we only have these certain people who are able to run, then everybody's going, wait a minute, what's going on and why? So last time around, it really was more of an education campaign. This time around, we've got a few different things going on. And I filed for chair and vice chair because you just don't know how the race is gonna fall after the chair election is done. And if you didn't file, like I said, because there was a filing deadline, if you didn't file before that deadline, you can't be considered for the vice chair race. So I'm just gonna file for both.
All right, well, that makes a lot of sense. So tell us, Amy, if elected chair of our Republican Party, what would be your top priority in your first 100 days?
My top priority really is number 1, transparency, and number 2, just trying to get people motivated to get out and knock doors. That is one of the things that voter turnout has just been really, really low. And a lot of people don't think that they need to block walk anymore. A lot of people don't realize how important it is. And a lot of people just don't realize how impactful they can be, even if all they did was knock an extra 5 doors every week in a wheelchair. So we've got a lot that can be done, but voter turnout is the big thing right for me.
Awesome. So tell us, what is something that the party is getting wrong right now that you would like to fix?
Right off the bat, the rule on just the delegate list was a big deal. That was a very wrong thing, and I'm very glad the SREC stepped in to fix that. But that was a bad call on the chair's part. So that needs to be fixed. The other thing is, like I said, transparency. A lot of people don't find out about these SREC meetings until it's almost on top of the meeting day, and people need time to be able to go and attend and listen and watch, because there's a big difference between just watching a meeting, between just watching an interview versus being able to go and talk to your SREC members and hear the chatter that's going on in the room and ask for clarifications and stuff like that. The other thing is RNC meetings. I haven't heard anything about RNC meetings.
Okay.
No opportunity for grassroots to jump in and go.
Right. So, the Texas GOP has a lot of factions in it, the grassroots, the establishment, everything in between. How do you bring our party together without diluting our principles?
That's a really hard thing, and I don't necessarily think you really can. I don't think you can. A lot of this really is going to be a matter of how a group shakes out, and that happens every time we do these conventions. Some people drop off, some people get motivated and get involved. Some people decide to jump in, and they're brand new and they haven't done any of that, before, and so they need some hand holding. But really, like I said, my focus tends to be on the process. And if I am sharing the entire process with everybody in a very transparent manner, that empowers everybody to be able to be involved. And that's one of the things I was doing on the RPT Convention 2026 group, is letting people know, hey, there's going to be these pre-convention Zoom meetings. Get ready for those. Hey, here they are. They're at this convention website. Make sure you go check that out. Hey, here they are. Let's restream these to get more eyes on them so delegates can see and hear what these committees are about, because it takes time to digest all that.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of tension between our grassroots activists and our elected officials because they feel that they don't vote the right way or uphold the principles of the party or the platform. So, how do you handle the conflict between elected officials and the activists?
That's totally up to the voters. I am in House District 13. Our state rep was censured, and the SREC concurred with the censure, but they did not implement penalty 3 that denied her ballot access. But at this point, at this point, she's on the ballot and she's up. And so it's up to the voters to really decide if they want to see a Republican in that seat or a Democrat, because one of them's going to win.
Yeah, so voters obviously are not in the trenches as we are with everyday politics, and they don't really know the insider baseball. So how could the party do a better job of informing voters of what the alternative challengers are in those races, so that they know how to make an educated pick?
That goes back to the block walking. We can send out text messages to people that are historic voters all day long. We can send out mailers. How many of us got stacks of mailers in our mailbox during this last primary? But at the end of the day, we've got to have people ready to go knock doors and tell people why the stuff that they may or may not be hearing about is happening.
Yeah. So let's talk about the grassroots priorities that come out of convention versus, say, the donor class and the priorities that they have. Sometimes those are two different sets of priorities. And how do you balance the priorities of our grassroots with the priorities of the major donors?
I don't try to balance it. And this is where whatever comes out of convention is the party's legislative priorities, whether it was put there by a major donor or by the grassroots activists. So at the end of the day, 8,000 people at convention voted on those for the most part.
Yeah. So what would be your fundraising plan if elected chair over the next 2 years? How would we raise money for the party?
That's a good question. I'd have to do a lot of powwowing with people that are a lot smarter on that than I am. I've watched a lot of differences over the last several administrations and been absolutely shocked at the disparity. So, it's about finding the people that have actually been raising the money and going and talking to them.
Yeah. So you talked about block walking and talking to voters. What would be your strategy to increase turnout in the Republican primaries?
You've just got to persuade people that the people on the ballot are actually worth voting for. And mailers don't do that. Text messages don't do that. You have to have people who have met the candidates and understand the issues that explain the impact of these people's votes and policies.
Yeah. With contested Republican primaries, should the party endorse in those races that are contested, or should the party not endorse in contested races?
outside of the Rule 44 censure process, they should not endorse.
Okay. Let's talk about sort of building a candidate pipeline. So, how will you recruit and develop the next generation of candidates?
Oh gosh, you know, I am a local elected official. I sit on a very tiny city council just south of Fort Worth in Hill County. And local elections are so important. And I think one of the strongest ways to educate people about this is to do it. And I would like to really urge a lot more precinct chairs and SREC and even other party leaders to step up and run for local office and to help encourage people to go. Because when nobody steps up to run against the local incumbents, people don't understand that elections are canceled and the the unchallenged candidate is declared elected without a single vote being cast. And you need to take those election reports around and really, really drive that home to people. And sometimes, I mean, I only won by 3 votes. It, people's votes matter.
Yeah, wow, boy, that's that's a tight race right there. 3 votes, my goodness. So, are you a big believer in Rule 44, and do you think we should stiffen the penalties or enforce penalty three more often?
I am a fan of Rule 44. I helped fight for Rule 44 since 2014. Back in 2020, during the dumpster fire convention, I was on the temporary rules committee, and we ended up putting the teeth in Rule 44 during that temporary committee meeting. And that was right before convention started. So there was a huge minority report. And this was before the RPT leadership was really on board with Rule 44 and penalties. So they were still really fighting it. But I was one of, that vote was 10 to 11. I was barely on the prevailing side on that. And I got replaced. I was not kept on the permanent rules committee because of that disparity at the time. And since then, I have watched the convention or the rules committee and leadership and general counsel make a complete 180. And until when they adopted the teeth in Rule 44, it was almost without dissent. The only person who was opposing it was Eric Opiella as he tried to filibuster the rules committee, which didn't work. But everybody just quietly went along with it. It was very, very weird. But it's a right that a party has, and they need to be able to exercise that right, and they need to know they can exercise that right.
Yeah. So, what is the core message that the Texas GOP should be communicating to voters right now?
Right now, that their policies are going to be better than the Democrat policies, and they need to be ready to back that up.
Yeah. How do we communicate our conservative values to younger voters more effectively?
By running candidates that actually model those values.
Okay. And where do you think Republicans are currently with our messaging battle for the general election in November? Do you think we're ahead or the Democrats are ahead?
I think the Democrats are ahead right now.
Yeah. And any ideas how to close that gap between now and November?
You know, I'm I'm going to go back to block walking. Social media is all over the place and can be very persuasive. I don't know if you guys saw that local or the latest influencer YouTube guy and his wife that advertised that they had an abortion because the child had Down syndrome. But this is a YouTuber that has a history of making up tons of stuff. So the odds are there was never even really a pregnancy. But social media is up in arms over what they saw on social media. We have to get off the screens and in front of people so they know that what they're seeing and hearing is real.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. So, what experience do you bring in managing large organizations, budgets, and teams?
Just my city council experience and
And
local
yeah, and
campaigns.
tell us a little bit about your city council background. A little bit about what size budget does your city have,
Oh
and
gosh, our council only has about a little over $2 million budget, but I've been watchdogging local government since about 2006, last 20 years. So in watchdogging that, it's looking at city and council and ISD budgets. One of the niches I've been filling is bond elections, and when we're looking at bond elections, we're reviewing stuff in the budget, stuff that's being handled in no new revenue rates and in historic tax applications and administration, and who's watchdogging what and where, and which organizations are involved, and where funding's coming from, and where revenue is and is not being spent. So I'm happy to bring a lot of that to the table.
talking about taxes, are you in favor of eliminating property tax? And if so, what would you replace it with?
I consider property taxes the equivalent of a cancer, and I would remove them and replace them with nothing. But I do understand that there are several plans on the table, from increasing consumption tax to addressing just the ISD M&O portion and stuff like that. So in Amy's world, the government structures would just have to rein in their spending, set up some GoFundMe's, and find local donors who wanted to pitch in to see government services that they think should continue. But I know that's not going to be the case. So it'll be interesting to see how this next session shakes down.
Yeah, definitely. How would you improve our parties, our data, our ground game, our infrastructure? What changes would you make?
Well, I would love to be able to say something about that, but I don't know what they're doing right now. So it's kind of hard to say what I would change when I don't actually have the details of what they are and are not doing at the moment.
Let me recouch that question a little bit. What does a high functioning state party infrastructure look like in your view?
Well, part of that would start off with a very active website that helps encourage and train people. One of the things that I have seen in campaigns over the years is, if you try to start looking for canvassing scripts and how to get stuff done and where to go and what to do, a lot of stuff that's in the Republican and conservative groups is behind a firewall. Whereas your liberals and your progressive groups, they put everything right there on the screen, print it and go and get started ASAP. And I think we need a lot more stuff that is toolkit, grab and go, print this and hit the streets running. People need to be empowered to act and act quickly, because when people have an idea, you've got to fan that flame fast, or it just gets stomped into the dust of everyday life and other responsibilities and distractions.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your ideas on that. So, tough question here. Why are you the best choice for chair over the other candidates specifically?
I don't pull my punches, and I'm very clear on what is and is not happening. I'm just not going to beat around the bush on what I'm seeing and what needs to happen.
If you face resistance from within the party, how will you lead through that resistance?
That depends on what kind of resistance is happening. Like I said, I'm a process girl. So if somebody wants to shut down transparency, then I'm going to point out who it is that's trying to shut down transparency. If somebody wants to shut down grassroots involvement, I'm going to point out who it is that wants to shut down grassroots involvement. But for the most part, I'm not seeing much other kind of resistance that I would personally encounter.
Closing question, Amy. If Texas Republicans give you this job, what's the legacy you'd like to leave for the party?
Increased transparency and greater involvement.
Awesome. Well, Amy, thank you so much for your questions, and glad to have you on our show. We're going to go now to part two and interview your husband, Gary. All right, so this is part two of our interview. I now have Amy's husband, Gary, on. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
So tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and why are you running for the chair position?
I have been thinking about running for the chair position for 50 years. I was born in Abilene and became a Republican during my high school years, worked for a congressional candidate, and got to know the state party at that time. Um, I was student body president at TCU, and then I went to Washington, D.C. And so most of my adult life has been away from Texas. Came back to Texas about 10 years ago. And I will tell you a little more about what I did in DC, but this is something that I've wanted to do for a very long time, to tell you the truth.
Awesome. Go Horned Frogs. Yeah. So tell us, Gary, if elected as our chairman, what would be your top priority in the first 100 days?
Well, that's a common and fair question. I think that we have not been doing enough fundraising. We need to hire some media experts. We've seen a campaign in Los Angeles that's just been astonishing, because when you use your imagination and do better advertising, it catches people's attention. And we need something like that. And it costs a lot of money. Doesn't cost $1 billion. You can find someone who has imagination, make some good material. And of course, you can always do the trick of putting it online. The media picks it up, and then you're not having to pay for ads to run against the F-150 ads and the Budweiser ads. People are finding it and clicking it and watching it without paying you anything.
Yeah.
Without costing you.
Yeah, right. So how would you define success for the Republican Party of Texas over the next 2 to 4 years under your leadership?
Well, there's only one measure of success, and that's how many races we win. I remember when there was very little Republican activity anywhere outside Houston, the Bushes and the days of having a few Republicans in Dallas. We've now come a very long way, and we haven't lost a race since the 90s. But we need more Republicans in the legislature. When you have a 2 or 3 seat majority, it means that just a couple of people peeling away or flaking out or not being there for your issue means that you have to be very desperate. We need to get back to the near 2/3 majority we had in the House. We need to lock down all the other offices, railroad commissioner, all the courts. We've done well, and we can do better. We need to win races by overwhelming majorities, which causes challengers to think twice. They say, why would I run against Greg Abbott if I'm a Democrat? Every time, we've seen this several cycles in a row, they say, oh, Wendy's going to come and she's going to beat Greg Abbott. And she gets stomped. And I think that helps protect your offices to go for the highest percentage you can, even if you've been winning.
So what's something that the party is currently getting wrong that you would like to remedy?
Well, I'm running because I realize that the candidates who are going to win can't say some things. They can't say we should make the convention smaller, but we should, because this convention can only be held in 2 places, in Houston and San Antonio. It'd be great to have more options. And there are many other things that are sort of off the table and red flags. And one of them is this whole Rule 44. We have the idea that we can define what it is to be a Republican. We can take a candidate and compare them to our platform and reject them from the ballot. That's a very popular idea. You interviewed my wife. She is a leading proponent of that idea. And it means that we spend much of the year criticizing office holders and people who are running for office. And after a year of saying that they're no different than Democrats, which, by the way, is not a winning argument, they take office and we call their office and say, hey, we'd like to come by and have a cup of coffee. And they don't return your calls. And it's not a big surprise.
Yeah, so what does it look like to build a cohesive statewide operation without diluting our principles that we hold dear?
Well, our principles that we hold dear call for us to uh, put the party first. And what I mean by that is it's a very common thing to say, my priorities are God and my family, and then politics. It's a distant third. And the very good news is the Republican Party doesn't ask you to do anything that you wouldn't be proud to talk about at church or at home. And so we need to have a party that wins these races by getting 50% plus one of the vote or more. And that's just crucial. It's really, that's all that there is. This is a 1 or a 0 game. You got to win the races, and to be cohesive, you have to act like a family. We are a family, and we need to have more tough talks. We're a family where there is a difference of opinion on some issues. On some of the core issues, there's no difference of opinion. We don't want higher taxes. We don't want people being restricted. We want smaller government and less oversight. And these are things that can unite a majority of voters, young people, old people, conservatives. I would say liberals will vote for you when you explain that you're going to cut their property tax. They care about that more than they care about some of these very, very esoteric issues that Democrats seem to be focused on.
So how do the grassroots handle our elected officials who they feel like they're not voting for the priorities, or they're watering down the bills or killing the bills in the calendars committee, not letting our bills get out to the floor for a vote, and they run the clock out? It makes the grassroots very angry. But you say, don't go scorched earth because we need to go have a cup of coffee with them in their office. How do you work with our elected officials?
Well, you can say a lot of those same things. You just should say them behind closed doors. When the media has a microphone in your face, you have to say, well, Senator X, he was a little off the reservation, according to some of our activists, and I agree with that. But we are confident that he's going to come out voting the right way and doing the right thing for Texas citizens. And too often, we have spokespeople who find it easier, because it is easier, to say, yeah, that was crazy. We need to get rid of that guy. We need to get rid of that woman. We need to primary her. The party really shouldn't be talking about primarying anyone. The party is legally responsible for running a fair primary. How can you say, give us your application to run, and if we think we can support you, we'll have a fair election. And if we think we can't support you, it'll still be a fair election, except we'll be telling everybody not to vote for you.
So let's talk about your fundraising plan for a second. What would be your plan to grow our small dollar fundraising across the state of Texas?
Small dollar is a lot like big dollar. What donors want is they want to see the party win. And again, I'm aware that there's a debate about whether you look to the far right, the middle right, the consistent right, the inconsistent right, the rhinos, the rich people who don't care about issues. None of that really matters if they are all united in wanting a free economy. They want to be left alone. They want to be able to buy a house and live there undisturbed by the state, the county, the city. And when you can go to a donor, and it might be a college Republican club meeting, and you can say the same thing that you say at a country club reception. You can say, we're going to use this money to help these candidates win. We're going to get a majority, and we're going to kill some of these stupid laws, and we're going to roll back some of these stupid regulations, and we're going to move the government in the direction that you want it to, that we want it to. We're going to move it to the right. And it's not a matter of catering to the center. I'm not making that argument. I'm not saying that conservative candidates who share my ideas and your ideas need to tone it down in some way, but they need to be persuasive, and we need more people in the streets explaining those positions to voters so that we can convince voters. You know, Ronald Reagan did a great job of this. He was a very conservative president, but he got a lot of votes from people who probably were not as conservative as he was.
So let's talk about our convention this week and what kind of priorities you think are going to come out of it whenever you've got Greg Abbott as a headliner, Dustin Burrows as a headliner, Texans for Lawsuit Reform sponsoring the prayer breakfast. So basically, we'll call them the donor class, are really paying for a chunk of our convention. Do you think that it's going to be Greg Abbott's priorities that we pass, or will the grassroots priorities pass this convention?
Well, you know, I know how to win an election. I know that elections are not about educating voters or arguing with them. You have to listen to voters and you have to agree with them. The voters at this convention have consistently voted in the past few elections to take the reins of the party, to say, this is our party, we own it, and we will write a platform, and we expect elected officials to follow the platform that we've written. I think that it's just a fact of life that there are going to be Greg Abbotts in the world who can raise more money than we can, and they're going to put their message out there. And our main job is to make absolutely certain that we don't end up with a Governor Beto. I think that we're losing sight sometimes of how bad that would be. I have lots of friends, and we debate these issues. We talk about strategy, and some people say, you know, Obama winning was a great thing. We picked up 10,000 state house seats during the time that he was in the presidency. And so if someone wins and becomes the Democrat comes into power, everybody will see how bad they are. I just don't believe that. I don't want to lose elections. I want to win elections. I believe, as I already mentioned, Reagan, that there are people who are thought by the media and the general public to be very, very conservative people, but they still have success talking to 51% of the voters. It doesn't do you any good to get 30% of the vote or even 45% of the vote. We have to win elections. That's our job, is to win elections.
So in that regard, what would be your strategy then for increasing Republican turnout in our elections?
Well, you interviewed Amy, and I hope that everyone who's listening to this has heard her points. We got married because we agree on a lot more than we disagree about. Talking to voters face to face is better than all the TV in the world. I was a member of the American Association of Political Consultants. I went to hundreds of meetings and conferences, and worked with some professors at Yale who were writing a book. You can measure the effectiveness of different types of communication. Robocalls don't win you an election. A robocall that says there's a tornado coming, run for your life, might be responded to, but one that says Gary Teal's a nice guy, not going to change anyone's vote. Direct mail, I got 40 pieces of direct mail on one race. I don't read the stuff. I love politics more than anything, but you're not going to learn anything by reading a piece of direct mail. If someone knocks on your door and says, "Hi, I'm John. I'm your neighbor. I live right down there in the blue house, and I have the same concerns you do. We live in the same community, and I've met candidate X, and I think you should vote for candidate X." That is powerful. People will listen to that. Everybody who votes listened to somebody, a minister, a family member, a boss, a coworker. They listened to someone, and we have to be out in the streets knocking on doors. It's hard to do, but it works.
So in primaries, what role should the Republican Party play in contested primaries?
They are conducting a fair election. There is no role they can play. And let me be clear about this. There are only a few people who are party officers, and I'm talking about the chairman of a county committee needs to be publicly absolutely fair. Now, there are once in a blue moon races where a truly crazy person can get on the ballot. And this doesn't constrain the party from rejecting a candidate whose views are universally offensive in some way or something like that. But the chairman can't say, I'm running a fair election. I'm going to be the person in the room when we're counting votes, and I think you should vote for person A. You got to be fair. Now, precinct chairs and people going door to door, they can say A is a good person and B is a rascal. A is a bright person and B is a dummy. They can say anything they want. In the primary process, I am not trying to tell the delegates at this convention that they need to tone it down or pull back. We're activists. We're in this because we have opinions and we need to push in the direction we want to see the party go. We need to elect the most conservative candidate that we can. And so I'm not saying that you shouldn't endorse candidates if you're an activist or something like that. You've got to go out there and preach. You've got to go tell people that you know more than they do. And you do. You know more than they do. And you've got advice for them.
So how does the party recruit and develop the next generation of candidates?
Well, we have a lot of nonpartisan offices in Texas, and Amy's in one of them, my wife, Amy. When you run for city council, when you run for school board, in theory, you're not a Republican or a Democrat. The Democrats learned a long time ago that that's the farm team. And we have tried a little bit. We just haven't had enough money to identify rising stars. When someone is 28 or 30 years old and they've achieved an election to the school board, we need to be taking them to additional training. We need to arrange for them to be able to meet legislators from the state, members of Congress. We need to take the people who are already emerging as political leaders, and they might just be other kinds of leaders. They might be a school principal. But it is absolutely a good question because it is something that party officials need to set aside time to do. We must identify the kinds of candidates. When people come to me and say, I want to run, what do I need to do? One of the first things I say is you need to deserve to win this race. So if you've been concentrating on your business and you've made a couple of $1 million and now you want to turn to city council, that's fine. That's fine. And you may be able to prove that you're a good manager, but you need to do something for your community too. You need to be the kind of person that people want to trust. Conversely, that means we can go to those people who have already achieved that level of success and make sure that the Democrats don't recruit them to run in that party.
So speaking of the Democrats, where do you think the Republicans are losing the messaging battle to the Democrats and why?
They have pretty much succeeded in my lifetime in turning the Republicans into the bad guys. No young person wants to be a bad guy. You don't want to be stingy. You would rather be beheaded than thought to be a racist. And as long as Democrats can point to Republicans and say, they're racists, they're stingy, they're people who don't care about the little guy, they'll keep winning races as long as they can get away with that. They're getting away with it less and less. Obviously, we have candidates in our party who are very successful, and they didn't have ancestors who came over on the Mayflower. I'm not going to try to name a whole series of them, but I'll go back in time. I'll say in 2010, There were only 3 Hispanics in America who were running for a statewide office. 3. And they all 3 won. And they were all 3 Republicans. Marco Rubio was one of the 3, Susana Martinez in New Mexico, and Brian in Nevada. So, I mean, it's just wrong to let them have that high ground. But there's the old joke that if you're young and not a liberal, then you have no heart. And if you're old and not a conservative, you have no brain. If you're 15 years old, it seems to make a whole lot of sense that we ought to just take away all of Elon Musk's money. Just take it away and hand it out to the poor people. We see poor people. All we have to do is give them money and they'll be fine. Sadly, when you get older, you learn that it doesn't work that way. We do need to have programs. We don't have people on the streets starving in America. We never want that. So we need to help people, and government has a responsibility in that area, but that's what we need to do to appeal to young people. We need to be the good party, and we need to show that our policies produce fewer poor people. Let me get this off my chest. Democrats want to do the most good they can for the greatest number of people. People say, how do you tell apart Democrats and Republicans? Well, I don't know any Democrat who would deny that. That's what they want to do. They want to collect tax dollars, and then they want to use government to help the greatest number of people and give the most good things. Well, that's a terrible idea, because Republicans want to run the government in such a way that people don't need help from the government. And it's really that simple. If you can go to school, get a job, get a paycheck, buy food, buy a home to live in, raise a family, and at no point along the line do you have to say, I need the government to give me $50,000. I need the government to feed me. I need the government to subsidize my car because it's a new model or something. So I think that we can appeal to young people, and we need to make sure that we never let any opportunity pass. The Democrats say we hate the environment. That's crazy. That's just crazy. There is no ultra conservative in the state of Texas who wants his grandkids to grow up in a world with dirty air and dirty water. It's just not true.
Yeah. So let's talk about your job experience. What experience do you bring in managing large organizations, budgets, and teams?
Well, a lot. On the political side, I was the vice chair of a state party, and I know this is going to make people laugh. I lived in D.C. for 30 years. D.C. is not a state. It will never be a state. It's not like a state. It has no farmers, no rural areas, but it is 3 electoral votes, and it does send 3 people to the Republican National Committee. I was vice chair of that party for a long time, and I assumed that I would become chairman of it. Instead, I came back to Texas, and I'm real glad. I haven't regretted that at all. I sort of have started from the bottom here in Texas. When I returned, I became executive director of the Travis County Republican Party. And so we did fundraisers and trained precinct chairs and others, trained people for conventions. When I left that job, I later became the executive director of the Bexar County Republican Party in San Antonio, and did all of those same things, and got to have some experience with a completely different set of local donors, completely different set of candidates. And maybe the highlight of my political career was when I left that job as executive director of the local party, and I was the campaign manager for a candidate that didn't need a campaign manager. Grant Moody is now a commissioner, Precinct 3 in Bexar County, and he's just a hell of a guy, hell of a candidate. It was a great honor for me to even work with him. And if you don't know the name, write it down. He will do very good things for Texas in the coming years.
How will you improve the party's data, ground game, and infrastructure?
That's what I do. Before I came back to Texas, I was the vice president at Aristotle, in charge of political data. Aristotle does compliance work, which means they help campaigns and committees file with the FEC and the TEC, which is a full-time job, and they collect voter data. So I've sometimes said that there are a lot of things I can't do. I can't play the banjo, but I can do a lot with voter files. We need very desperately to get that data, which is publicly available data. It's available to anyone who goes to the county and says, I'm going to use it for a lawful purpose. I'm not a perfume salesperson. I want to contact my fellow citizens and ask them to vote for my candidate. They'll give it to you. We need to give it to more people. And the parties do what the private firms like Aristotle do. They improve the data. They weed out the people who passed away. They add lots of data like the census data so that you can say, I want to target the people who live in neighborhoods with higher incomes or lower incomes. They do a lot of commercial data so you can get a list of people with children, a list of people without children. And that is something that's really a core competency of mine and something that I would dearly love to get into the hands of people. And Amy's heard me say that so many times. She said it too. Sometimes people say, I'm ready to do some work. Can you give me something to do? If we're ready with a list and we say, here's a list of your neighbors. If you're new to the neighborhood, this is exactly what you've been looking for. It's everybody's middle name, their date of birth. And you know ahead of time whether they're good citizens who vote every time or whether they're citizens who vote the wrong way every once in a while. If you're a longtime homeowner in that area, you have even more reason to get the voter file. So anybody listening to this, please request your voter file. And if you're told, no, we don't really want to give it to you, then keep asking until you find someone who knows that you have a right to it, first of all, and then do good things with it. Man, you show up at a meeting with 10 people who greet you and say, thanks for inviting me to this. There will be people in the room who will be astonished and they'll say, how did you get these people to come? And you say, I talked to them. I called them on the phone. I knocked on their door. I wrote them a letter. And, some of us we're not really inclined to go meet strangers. I understand that. But basically, it's what grown-ups do. You get to know the people who you're going to work with on local issues. And politics is just a matter of getting to know people. Watch their dog while they're away from home. If they go on vacation, keep an eye on the house. These are the people who will listen to you when you say, I've met this candidate and he's the person you should vote for.
Awesome. Last question, Gary. Why are you the best choice for our chairman over all the other candidates specifically?
I might not be. I have not run a real campaign. If I were emperor, which is something I end up saying a lot, I would change the rules so that someone who wants to run for chair should have to prove that they've been thinking about it and working on it. I'd like to see someone who can demonstrate the ability to raise money. I'd like to see someone have a requirement to file 3 months ahead of time. I'd like to see a requirement to visit counties, large counties and small counties throughout the state. And, this is a commitment. I understand that if you're running a small corporation or if you're a retiring member of Congress, these would be hard hurdles to clear. But I think that what isn't right is to say, as the rules currently say, up until recently, just let the secretary know. And right now we have a great secretary, best secretary of any state party. But if we make it too easy, then you get people like me who come out of nowhere. Now, I'm a serious candidate. These are serious ideas that I would like to inject into the conversation. And I hope that if I have a chance to speak to the delegates, some people will scratch their heads and think about it and maybe start talking about it. If I were elected, I would do a good job. I would require a lot of help from a lot of great friends. I have been in touch with previous chairs. I reported to James Dickey. He hired me to be an executive director in Travis County. So I attended many RNC meetings. I'm the right person to ask about what could be done because I've seen all the wrong things. I'm not a natural. I've made mistakes, and when you're my age, you can say to people, "Don't do it that way." I tried that in 1984, and it doesn't work. I hope that I will start a conversation, and maybe I'll run a serious campaign in 2 years or 4 years, because this is something that I've devoted my life to. It's what I care about. I think it's terribly, terribly important, and I haven't asked anybody for money, haven't asked anyone for an endorsement, friend or former boss or anyone, but I'm looking forward to having a chance to address the convention.
Awesome. Well, Gary, I appreciate your honesty in answering all my questions. Just want to mention that our website for the convention is texasgop.org. We begin this week. So if you've not registered yet and you're a delegate, you better get on that right away. Also want to mention danielnation.com is our website. This podcast will be posted out there as well as on our YouTube and Rumble pages at Daniel Nation. And appreciate you guys tuning in to part 6 of our Chairman Series podcast. We will see you, Gary, this week, and Amy there at the convention in Houston. And we appreciate you coming on our show. God bless you.
God bless you, and thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.